Hello, it's Phillip Taylor from Richmond Green Chambers speaking. This is a review I've written with my wife Elizabeth about a book called The Rule of Law, which is a collection of various papers edited by Francis Neate. You can see the book here. This is the Flickr review. The book itself is a very interesting one. It's not particularly big. It's from LexisNexis, and it's got various sort of paragraph numbers. You probably can see them very vaguely there. To cover the individual papers. It's a learned work, and there's a lot of detail contained right at the back, including a short index concerning all the various papers. It's The Rule of Law, Perspectives from Around the Globe. Now, I've given it a title on the internet, A Ruling on Our Laws. Now, you'll all remember, I'm sure, the time when you had to do jurisprudence and the theory of law, and we came across the rule of law as a concept. Obviously what I've got to do here is explain how Francis Neate explains it himself. He says it's emerged prominently into public discussion, and although it defies a precise definition, it's of special interest to us as lawyers, and one in which we perhaps should pay a bit more attention. And he's right there, because certainly when I've taught the subject it's always been very difficult. A lot of people are not interested in the concepts, but we have to get some basic principles sorted out. And as the general editor, Mr. Neate, in his 270 odd pages, which is split in actually to 27 chapters, in fact the various papers that he's looking at. It's actually therefore a compilation of academic papers on what we mean by the rule of law. And these papers were delivered primarily at one of the several international symposia by a number of distinguished contributors, ranging from people like Lord Bingham and Lord Goldsmith to Valery Zorkin, the first and current chairman of the Constitutional Court of the Russian Federation. Other contributors which people would be interested to know about include Mary Robinson, the former Irish president, and Justice Albie Sachs, who's an anti-apartheid campaigner, first appointed by Nelson Mandela in 1994, and he served on South Africa's Constitutional Court, and has a book out shortly, in fact sometime in June, from Oxford University Press with his memoirs. Again, it's an interesting area because it's looking at modern approaches to the rule of law. So just reading their brief biographies in the introductory section to this volume, it's an interesting exercise in itself, because obviously when one's researching the concept of the rule of law, it's nice to see that sort of balance across the range. The symposia were convened under the auspices of the International Bar Association, the IBA. There's an interesting website with this information from the book on it. And it's been at the forefront, of course, of promulgating interest in and insights into the rule of law worldwide, and how that rule actually works today. Basically, the rule of law refers to a system of law binding on all, even kings, and it acts as a restraint on the powers of the mighty. For instance, the law of Moses is a very good example. It encompasses two fundamental principles, namely that those in power should not make the laws, and all people, including those in power, should be bound by the laws. The rule of law, said Aristotle in The Politics, is preferable to that of any individual. And obviously throughout history we've had various views put forward, because since Aristotle we've obviously had Socrates and Plato a century before him, but the quest for justice under the law has been a recurrent one. The epic struggle to establish and apply the principles of the rule of law has taken place over more now than 2 millennia. So it's not something that's brand new, obviously. The struggle, which still continues, has been advanced by certain pivotal events, such as Magna Carta in 1215, the Putney debates at the end of the English Civil War and the American Revolution, which, as Neate says, represented a major turning point in the history of the relationship between government and the governed. And we're actually seeing that at the moment in 2009 with a clear crisis of confidence in Parliament in the United Kingdom. Dipping into the content, therefore, of the book, one discovers any number of interesting gems. For example, check out the chilling reminder of how Hitler circumvented and abused the rule of law in Nazi Germany by the simple expedient of the Enabling Act, which was passed without the required two-thirds majority. Communist members, having been arrested, were prevented from voting. Remaining representatives were reminded of the persuasive power of the stormtroopers. The Enabling Act, as a device, meant that Hitler could enact legislation without parliamentary ratification, and therefore without any checks on his legislative power, which in these turbulent and unsettling times begins to sound vaguely familiar, especially the bit about parliamentarians being arrested. How much legislation, therefore, has been enacted in the UK during the last decade without parliamentary debate and almost unnoticed by the press or public? Quite a lot, you would think. One can always dream up excuses for this disquieting situation. The most oft-repeated one being that debating various measures in Parliament is, well, tedious and time-wasting. How easily are hard-won liberties eroded in the name of efficiency. And if you look at the modern Parliament from 1997 to 2009 in the United Kingdom, you've got a fairly good idea of some of the problems that this book is actually looking at in a roundabout way. With its global and historic perspectives, which I welcome, and certainly Elizabeth does too, Neate's editorship of the Rule of Law is certainly a riveting read, and it offers authoritative and fantastically useful background to practitioners, learners, and casual readers alike who wish to delve further into this fascinating and suddenly very topical subject, which we'll have another election ruling on very shortly. So therefore, as I said in the beginning, a ruling on our laws. That's the rule of law, in fact, as we're looking at it at the moment, so it's well worth looking at for the future. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.